A mother, 3 victims, and a sequence of events prosecutors say was carefully set in motion. New details reveal what allegedly happened in the final moments before the violence. Allegations, it began with a massage and ended in murder. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. All right, real quick, let's talk about this app. You're gonna love it. It's called Upside. It gets you cash back on everyday purchases like gas, groceries, and takeout. Here's what you do. Download Upside, it's free. Then you claim an offer at one of their 100,000 plus locations. Then you pay like you typically would with your card, verify the purchase next, then you get money back. It's easy as that. I've used it getting gas or maybe takeout. I search for offers on Upside. Then after I spend, money appears in my app. I just transfer it straight to my bank. Upside's frequent users earn an average of $254 back a year. So to start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code and use promo code OTC to get an extra 25 cents bonus on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Jenna Strouble is facing 9 counts of first-degree murder for allegedly killing the father of her children and his parents at their home south of Chicago. Now, we knew that she allegedly made what police considered incriminating statements when she was taken into custody, but we did not expect what prosecutors are alleging she said. Now, you never know what is really going on in the mind of some people. We found pictures of Jenna Strouble and one of her alleged victims, Jake Lambert, looking like they're great co-parents, but pictures only tell you part of the story. And we know that criminals, they have all kinds of backgrounds, they have all kinds of issues, but this case, it really shocks us when you think of the allegations and then you see pictures like this one. It's from 2021 and it shows Strouble when she was expecting one of the children who she shared with Jake Lambert. Now, it's unclear what their relationship was in the weeks leading up to these killings, but there had to have been some level of trust for what prosecutors are alleging happened in just the minutes before Strouble allegedly went on this killing spree. Now, this is a crime that prosecutors say was allegedly done with intention, and one they allege was planned for months, going back to last year. Today, Strouble made a brief court appearance in Will County, Illinois. Cameras are not being allowed inside the courtroom for this. We'll talk a little bit about what happened in just a moment, but before we do, I want to get to this new information that we're getting in about Jenna Strouble and what prosecutors say played out. Now, Patch.com was the first outlet to obtain a court document that was filed by prosecutors in this case that is giving a ton of details into the allegations. Prosecutors filed this petition in hopes that a judge would deny releasing Strouble ahead of a trial. And let me tell you, if these allegations are true, she is a calculated killer. Now, all of this began in the early morning hours of March 23rd. Neighbors on Norway Trail in Tiny Creek Township, Illinois, about an hour south of Chicago, called 911 after they heard what sounded like gunfire coming from the home of Patrick and Stacy Ford. That's also where Jake Lambert lived. Now, police responded for what they called a well-being check, and when they got to the house, they found Jake Lambert. He was dead inside a car that was parked outside. Lambert had been executed, it appeared, and not only was he dead, his parents, his mom and his stepdad, they were found shot dead as well. They were on the first floor of the house near the door, according to police. Stacy Ford was 54 years old and Patrick Ford was 55. And we knew that police early on, they considered this to be an act of alleged domestic violence. And it wasn't long until they had a person of interest, and that person was arrested, and that person is Jenna Strouble. Now, Lambert shared a 3-year-old son and 4-year-old daughter with Strouble. Police considered their relationship to be on again and off again. Now, here are some of the details that the document that Patch was able to get and some of the other local outlets in Illinois are getting right now, according to what prosecutors in Will County are saying. Now, police say that Strouble came to Lambert's home in Creek Township between 11 and 11:30 p.m. on March 22nd. The couple then allegedly drove to a nature preserve, which is roughly 15 minutes away. Strouble allegedly told authorities that she had told Lambert that she had a surprise for him that night and she wanted to give him a surprise. Now, Strouble then said the nature preserve was closed, so they decided to go to another location. Patch says that Strouble told Lambert to recline his seat so she could give him this massage on his back. And she said that she had bought a massage gun. Strouble allegedly rubbed Jake's back with his face down for about 20 minutes. She then told authorities that when Lambert criticized her technique of doing the massage, she allegedly reached under the seat and pulled out a handgun. Prosecutors say that the massage continued, and during that massage, there was a gun pointed at Lambert's head for roughly 8 minutes. It's unclear if he knew that a gun was pointed at his head for that period of time. Now, Strouble allegedly said that she thought about killing Lambert right then and there, but then she also thought about, maybe in her words, putting it off and not doing it that night. But prosecutors say about 8 minutes after she pointed a gun at Lambert's head, she fired, hitting him and killing him. This is according to the narrative being put out by prosecutors. Strouble then allegedly smoked a cigarette and drove back to Jake's parents' house with his body in the car. She then allegedly went into the home using the keys of Jake Lambert, and that's where she met Patrick Ford. Ford allegedly asked what she was doing there, and she shot and killed Jake's stepdad as soon as he opened the door. Then, with all the commotion by the front door, Jake's mom, Stacy, came downstairs allegedly, and Strouble allegedly shot her dead as well. Now, Strouble, after that, according to this narrative, drove to her home, which is in St. John, Indiana. It's not that far away. It's about 15 minutes, right over the state line from Illinois. And it was at her house that she allegedly called her sister, saying that she wanted her sister to have custody of the kids and not her own parents. Now, on top of allegedly killing Lambert and his parents, she also told authorities she thought about killing her own parents in this document. Now, when Strouble was arrested, the kids were allegedly at her house with her parents. It's obviously fortunate hearing this that more lives were not allegedly lost. So you have to wonder, as you hear all of this, what happened that would push someone to allegedly do this? Now, we don't really know a motive for murder at this point. Strouble allegedly said that she did not like the way that Lambert spoke to the children, and she found the Fords to be overbearing. She also allegedly said that she didn't feel like the kids were safe with their dad and his parents, which is a sadly ironic statement when you consider what the allegations are now and what she allegedly did. Now, prosecutors say that Strouble's plan was intentional. They are alleging that she told them that she had this plan as far back as last year. And the gun that was allegedly used was purchased for her to do this in December of 2025. And on top of that, she bought a suppressor online. Now, according to police, 2 more suppressors were allegedly found in her home, and there was a bullet in her purse. Strouble allegedly had considered suicide in the past. One plan she told law enforcement about, they say, was for her to jump out of her own window with her children. But then last year, her plan allegedly turned to murder. Prosecutors say that she took a rifle from her dad, and she told her own father that she wanted to kill Jake Lambert, but she didn't have a plan at that point. Now, it's interesting that Strouble also allegedly told police that she didn't spend much time with her children. She's unemployed, and she voluntarily turned the children over to Lambert and his parents. Now, we know that Strouble had a previous interaction with law enforcement, according to local media. It happened in January 2025. She reportedly was involuntarily committed after a domestic incident at the same home where she allegedly killed Lambert and his parents. No charges appear to have been filed in connection to that case. The only case on Strouble's record that we were able to find was a traffic violation from 2018. Now, in court today, Patch reports that Strouble was in the courtroom. It only lasted for roughly a minute. She appeared coherent. She spoke clearly, they say. Strouble allegedly told the judge that she had hired an attorney, but that attorney could not be present today. So Strouble will actually be back in court tomorrow for a pretrial conference with an attorney there. Now, right now, the people who knew Stacy, Jacob, and Patrick, they are remembering people who they say brought a lot of good into this world. Jake's obituary describes him as a loving son and a father and a dear friend to many. And donations on his obituary are to go to a place called Celebrate Recovery, which is a church that helps those impacted by substance abuse. Patrick, he was an avid golfer. He loved his family and his grandkids, according to friends. And one friend writes that he will be missed beyond description. And Stacy was the director of finance for a graphic manufacturing company, and that company posted on Facebook that she was their backbone for more than 20 years. Now, before we get to what could happen next in this case, this is obviously a very alleged, chilling case of domestic violence. And if you or anyone you know may be a victim of domestic violence, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, or you can text START to 88788. You can remain anonymous, and this is a line that is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Join us now to talk more about this case. Melba Pearson, civil rights attorney, criminal law attorney, former prosecutor, and you can find her at Your Resident Legal Diva on YouTube. It's always great to have you here on Law and Crime. There's a part of this story that we're going through, and there's an allegation that she reportedly makes that she had a plan to kill Jake Lambert before this happened. And she took her dad's gun, allegedly, at some point. And though she may have wanted to kill him, she didn't have a plan at that point. It doesn't appear that there were ever any charges related to that, or if it was ever reported to police. Maybe this is the first time police are hearing it. I guess from a legal standpoint, with what she's now accused of doing, how does something like that play into how is this not stopped if people knew that she had issues and perhaps the intention to do what she did?
Well, great to be on with you, Chris. And there's a few layers to this. So, first off, the fact that she had kind of tried to do this before, even though she didn't actually try and attack him or anything like that, but she made that first step in terms of trying to get a weapon and verbalizing that she wants to kill her partner. That right there is something that prosecutors can definitely use as something to show that it, in a way, would kind of beat back some of the mitigation the defense would be trying to use, saying she's mentally ill and all of that. Well, she was able to put together the intent to try and do this before. So, with that prior interaction, that is something I think the prosecutors can use to show that she had intent, she's able to form intent, and this wasn't an accident. She was mad, self defense, anything like that. So, that's going to be critical. Now, looking at the dad specifically, from a civil perspective, no question, I think the surviving members of the victim's family, they have grounds for a lawsuit,
Mhm.
because the reality is he knew his daughter had mental health issues. There was a firearm in the house. She took his firearm. While she did not act on it, she took the firearm and verbalized that she was intending to kill her partner. She just didn't have a plan yet. That right there should have been enough for him to pick up the phone and be like, listen, maybe you didn't want to call 911, fine, but you call 311 or any of the other, and I don't know, in Florida we have 311, but there's usually another hotline when someone is having a mental health crisis. You call that. So that way she's would be involuntarily hospitalized. She can get the care she needs. She could be diagnosed, and then that could have potentially saved their lives. So the fact that he took no action and knew that she had homicide on her mind, that's liability right there. Now, there's also potentially criminal liability that can be found. We've seen this in the Crumbly case. We've seen this in the case recently in Georgia, where the parents got charged when their child committed a school shooting. Slightly different scenario because of the fact that she's not underage, clearly, but at the same token, he had knowledge that she's got homicidal ideations, that she's got murder on her mind. And he did absolutely nothing to protect the community, or not even call the victim to be like, listen, my daughter's been acting weird, keep your head on a swivel, like, maybe you want to increase your security, something, warn somebody.
Yeah.
And this may have been avoided.
We might be getting into the weeds on stuff that we don't really know a lot of details about yet, but like even on that note, like she clearly has some sort of mental health issue. Clearly. I mean, twisted, disturbing, every negative word you can think of. That's what these allegations are, and calculated all of this. But like there's something going on there that, whether it was diagnosed or not. In a case like if you're the father and you hear that she's telling police this of like, well, I took his gun back in, wherever it was, and like I was going to kill Jake Lambert, but I just didn't have a plan at that point. From like a civil standpoint, how do you prove that that actually is what happened? Because the dad could just say this, my daughter is crazy and I don't even know what she's talking about.
Yeah, well, and that's why I said you may have grounds. Doesn't mean just because you have grounds does not mean the suit is going to be successful. But it is something that I would think, once the family's through this, horrible season of the, initial grieving, and I say initial because this is a lifetime of grief. This is not, oh, we'll be fine in a year. So I want to center that. But once they're through that initial season of the, first grieving plus the criminal justice process, they may want to explore their options in terms of, is this viable? But I think I'd be remiss in not saying, hey, this is something to think about because, again, we saw the outcome. And at the end of the day, if he in fact does have a weapon consistent with what she said she took from him and placed under her bed, if the timelines match up, and it is a much lower burden than a criminal case. A criminal case, the burden is you have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. In civil, it's preponderance of the evidence, which means you're like 51% likely that the person did it versus, and beyond a reasonable doubt is a much higher threshold. So there's a pathway. Not saying and guaranteeing it's going to be successful, but there is a pathway.
And you look at the allegations of what she did that night. You can just look at the allegations of everything. I mean, going back to when she maybe first thought of this plan, and this is her words apparently to police, is what all of this is based off of. But, from planning to do this in December and then, going on the night of saying that she's going to give him a massage, they drive somewhere, she allegedly executes him, and then she carries all of this out. And you do walk away saying, like, there's some sort of mental health issue here. There's no doubt about it. But, like, how does that factor into whether she could say that she was insane, or like, how does that factor into a defense for her with what she's accused of doing and what she apparently admitted to doing to law enforcement?
So insanity is a non-starter. Reason being that, first of all, in terms of insanity, can you appreciate the seriousness of the charges in front of you? Can you meaningfully participate in your defense? Those are the two key things that any judge is going to be looking at in deciding whether or not, you're competent to stand trial, and also whether or not an insanity defense is even viable. So the reality is, yeah, she appreciates what's going on. She's competent to stand trial. I don't think there's going to be any issue there. Now, is she going to argue through her lawyer's temporary insanity? Don't think that's going to work, because now we've got a track record of her saying these horrible things at different points in time. So I don't think that's going to happen. That, her planning in terms of getting the massage gun and all of that is going to be harder to argue that, oh, it was just a temporary break. I don't see that working as well. I think mental health is more going to play into the negotiations in terms of if there's a plea, if there's even an option for a plea, right? That, listen, she's not altogether there. Unfortunately, she had undiagnosed mental illness, which created the perfect storm for this. Doesn't mean she's not guilty by reason of insanity, because again, she appreciated the severity of what she did. She knew she killed somebody. It wasn't like, oh, she thought Martians came down and committed this crime. No, she's like, I got the gun, I killed him, this is how I went about it. I don't know why I did it, I don't know why I went to the parents or whatever, but I still did it. So it's going to be more negotiations, I think, than actually using it at trial and using that to say she's not guilty.
Because I also just look, reading through this article that has, the petition that was put in by prosecutors, it was so detailed of not just the, that night and the narrative that played out, but you also have the details that came from, when she first had this plan, times that she thought about doing other stuff, apparently, that she didn't actually go through. Like, I mean, it must have taken hours for her to lay out all these different details. How do you use, if that's been recorded? And I don't know if this will go to trial. It seems like that'd be a really tough case for a defense attorney to take at this point, if she admitted to all of this under oath, or after she was read her rights. Like, how do you take that, for a trial attorney, for a prosecutor, if it actually got to that point, do you just press play on an hour and a half interrogation and then just let it ride to the jury, especially if she's admitting to all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the confession would be the central part of the prosecution's case, because she's saying in her own words what she did, the processes by which she committed this homicide. So she can literally walk the jury down the path. So the only, I think, avenue could be for the defense is that either A, the police didn't properly read her rights, or that she didn't understand her rights at that time. And so when she gave that confession, it wasn't like a knowing and voluntary one. So if I was a defense attorney, I'd be looking for a way to get the confession tossed. And short of that, there's nothing else you're going to be able to do, like literally.
Because how difficult is it to get? I mean, certainly something like this that a judge knows is going to be at the crux of this case. I guess how blatant of a violation of someone's rights does it have to be for a judge to look and say, this entire interrogation, everything that she's admitted to, And they still would likely have, it seems like, a strong case even without her words, because they've been able to tie her together to all these different things. But I guess how often does that actually happen, where a massive piece of evidence like this could be tossed in a case like this?
Hey, it's happened to me. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility, because again, we're talking about a slight procedural error made by the lead detectives that could completely cause everything to unravel. So again, if they didn't read her rights in a timely manner, if she was exhibiting strange signs in the interrogation room and they didn't say, okay, stop, maybe we should bring in a doctor and make sure she's, in her right mind, or make sure, hey, have you been diagnosed with something? When's the last time you took your medications, right? Those sorts of questions. If they didn't go down that path, that is an avenue that the defense could use to try and get the confession tossed out of court. Not saying it's going to be effective, but again, as attorneys, we play the hand we're dealt, and sometimes it's a good hand and sometimes it's an awful hand. So that's the only move forward I would think from a defense perspective.
And you look at just her background. I mean, you look at pictures of her on Facebook, and if you were to say, this person's going to go on this killing spree, and here she is at her 2-year-old daughter's birthday party, with a balloon arch, acting like, it just seems like, at least in 2023, which seems like when some of the social media posts stopped being posted, that like everything was fine. And pictures only tell you so much. But I also think, like, in some cases, if we were talking about an 18, 19-year-old, man, we'd be looking and just, I don't know if there would be the sympathy there that you might have for a person who's this mom, as we see in the pictures. Like, how often does that actually play into the way some of this goes, where a prosecutor says that she could be this sympathetic just character to jurors who maybe haven't heard anything about this case, who would sit down? Like, how does that actually factor into how a prosecutor, takes on a case, and maybe how plea negotiations might go?
Well, considering you have to look at everything in your case, and that includes not only the evidence, confessions, all of that, but how the defendant is going to come off to the jury. Now, that should not be your primary reason for offering a plea or anything like that, but you have to think about that in terms of, how am I going to present my case? What am I going to lead with? What am I going to end with, in terms of knowing that, okay, she may get on the stand. Likely not, but she may get on the stand. How is that going to play to the jurors? But then again, also too, remember, the average juror is, well, in jury selection, you're going to try and eliminate any of the jurors that have seen a ton of coverage on this case. So there's that. But, once you kind of get past that, the jurors may not have seen those Facebook pictures of her with the kids, right? Like, and those pictures may not even come in at trial. So they may not get that perspective of her being this family, unless in the defense case, they try to bring in these photos or something like that. But again, it has to be relevant. They can't just throw up a picture of her and her kids. So I don't think that that's going to be the biggest driver in this case at all. But it is something both sides have to think about. How sympathetic is she going to come across? And then as a result, should we, change course or adjust accordingly?
And I just think of, reading through, what is being alleged in this court document. And it was just like, from us, kind of covering the case last week when we didn't really know what went down. And then you find out what they believe happened here, from the massage in the car, and then driving to the house, and then, all of this. Just what was your reaction, I think, as you read it, having covered so many of these cases, having worked cases like this? Just what stands out to you about Strouble now, having read that, and all of these are, of course, allegations, compared to maybe before we knew this stuff?
The level of planning and her prior statements, where she was criticizing her partner's parents in terms of, she didn't like their parenting style. She didn't like that somebody was showering with one of the kids. And, so she had, despite her not being really coherent in everything, she did have these, what's the best way to put it? I mean, she had these moments where she had clear issues with the family that in any other circumstance could lead to motive, right? That could lead to her forming that intent. So, all of those different aspects to me paint a very disturbing picture. And again, I still keep coming back to the dad. Like, you knew there's something up with your daughter. And she's saying, even if it was a joke, if she's saying, hey, I want to kill my partner, I just don't have a plan yet, that's not a haha. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
it stood out to me too, just like there seems like there was still, like, you had this domestic battery January 2025 that they said happened. And then it was this on again, off again relationship. But like there's still apparently that night, there was a level of trust that Jake Lambert allegedly had with, and look, she's the mother of his children. But it just like, there still seemed to be, for as disturbing as all these allegations are, like, it's as if he had no idea that behind the scenes, there was all this planning that was going on. And I just wonder how much, like, what the relationship was actually like, and up until that.
He may have had no clue. And again, that's part of the nature of domestic violence, intimate partner violence relationships, where, you have this back and forth and there's a violent episode and then it's, oh, I'm sorry. And, and it works both ways. I mean, women can be abusive towards men, men can be abusive towards women, and, same sex partnerships, same difference. So he may have thought like, oh, okay, well, maybe we're past the worst part of things. Maybe she's trying to get back together, or maybe it's just, again, raw attraction. And he thought it would be harmless to, be with her at that moment. And sadly, it wasn't. So,
yeah.
Just a reminder for folks who are in these types of relationships, they very rarely get better. So, seek help. RAINN is an amazing organization, RAINN. They do a lot of work around intimate partner violence and sexual assault. So just, there's resources out there, and please just, try to get yourself help and get yourself safe.
Yeah, just such an incredibly tragic case. Melba Pearson, always great to have you here on Law and Crime to help us understand these a little bit better. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also now streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.